Good morning. This is Mr. Thurley, your DECA advisor, and today we're going to be talking about submitting your prepared DECA projects. So for many of you, you've created a written project, and at this point it's time to submit that project. So just to go over a couple things that we'll be referencing throughout is when you go to submit your DECA project, it will be actually printed out and put into one of these DECA folios or blue binders. And a few of the different things that we're going to be putting in there include the written statement of assurances, which I'll take care of, and then your project. To break up your project and send it to a way that I can print it in full color and it looks nice, I ask that you send it in two forms. First, you'll save your table and title page as a PDF file, and then you'll save the main content of your project into a PDF as well. So again, it's going to be printed. I take care of printing. We print it out on very nice paper, and we print it out in color so that you don't have to worry about it, and it looks very professional. So before we get to that point, we have a few things I want to talk to you about. The first one includes looking at the written entry guidelines, and we'll talk about this shortly, and then we'll also talk about formatting tips, avoiding penalty points, and actually sending your project print ready to me. So let's first go to the written entry guidelines. To do this, you'll want to go to DECA's national site. So you can just go to DECA.org, you'll click under high school and competitive events, and you'll see that all of the events start to come in. What you'll want to do with your prepared event, and this should not be new, but you'll want to find it and then scroll down to where it says guidelines. So we're just going to pick one of the prepared projects as an example. So let's pretend that I was doing the finance operations project. So I'm going to click on the guidelines. In the guidelines, you'll see all the different directions for this particular project. Make sure you read all the directions for your project so you completely understand what it entails. At this point, most of you do. However, it's the little things that you may have to make sure that you go back and take a look at. So for example, it says event overview, and it talks about the scoring of this project. The other thing that it mentions here is any little details of how many people can be there, how many pages it can be, what do you need, presentation, and topic if it has one. So make sure that you're clear on those things, and then the most important thing that I want to show you is the written entry guidelines. On this particular page, it's going to talk about how to submit your project and what you need to have. And the first thing that I want you to pay attention to is the title page. On this particular thing, it gives you all the information that needs to be present on that title page. This includes the name of the event, the name of our high school, our school's address, city, state, and zip code. And then you put your names on there as well as today's date. You'll also have to include a picture on your title page, which kind of helps make it look a little bit more professional, and that will not be a numbered page. The second thing that you'll work on, and actually even though it comes second, you'll probably want to wait till the end, is the table of contents. This should be done and list all the page numbers that your sections start on. And by sections, I mean these down here. So your first section in the table of contents would be the executive summary starting on page 1. Okay? Now, the other thing I want to point out is that DECA gets very picky on making sure that they can score projects fairly. And to score projects fairly, they need to be sequenced and put in the order given here. And they need to be done exactly like this. So for example, you need to have Roman numeral executive summary exactly as it appears, and then put your summary underneath that. Same goes for these. It needs to match exactly Roman numeral 2 introduction. Then you need to have any A's, B's, C's, and any numbers along with their headings over here as well. Now on this particular part, if there's any A's or letters and numbers, you can change the wording slightly, but I would try to keep it pretty much the same. And when I say you can change it slightly, What that means is you have to keep the spirit of what it's asking. So for example, in the first one, it says description of business or organization. If you wanted to, you could say description of the actual business or organization that you did it with. So if I did this for CertaPro, I could say description of CertaPro. But I couldn't, it still keeps the essence of what the title is asking for. My recommendation, copy what they have here, match it exactly. And we'll talk more about why that's important later. The next thing is obviously make sure that you look at the presentation guidelines, because after you've finished your written part, you should be putting together your presentation. Because again, if you look at the directions for how you get scored in this particular project, 60 points come from your written part and 40 points come from your presentation. So make sure that you're on board and you've read all directions, you look at how you're scored, and life should be good. So that's the written guidelines. The next part we'll look at is formatting tips. Part of not only having great content is presenting your content, your written content, in a way that helps the viewer or reader understand it to its fullest and also looks professional. So I'm just going to go through a couple of quick examples with you about what that might look like. Here's a project from last year. And the very first thing that this will start with is an executive summary. Now, an executive summary is an actual summary of your entire project. So you should write this last, but it should capture every detail of your project, or at least highlight every major detail of your project. So my advice to people as they write the executive summary is that if you look back at the guidelines, you should almost put in your executive summary an overview of what you did. In this case, it would be methods, research methods used, findings, your strategic plan, your budget, all those things should be present. So the project that we're actually looking at here was indeed one that matches up with that criteria. So as we look at this, they captured first what did they do, with a quick little intro with the business, and then they also kind of talked about how that business works, what's going on in that business, and it matches up again with this guidelines. If you're doing a different project, you should have the different headings in your executive summary. I can't stress enough how important your executive summary is, as it's the first impression of your project. Okay? So as other formatting tips go, you'll notice that it's very clear, organized, and they use graphics, graphic organizers to help utilize what they're trying to say. As you scroll through this, it stays clean. We get to the introduction, and you'll notice a couple things on that. They use charts, they use pictures, and it just breaks up the text a little bit. They use infographics to help people understand kind of what they're talking about. The use of color, lines, all of this helps us better understand their text. As far as formatting goes, what I recommend is that if you're using pictures and different text, I would align them to the right-hand side, since we read left to right, and also so that they naturally come to your graphic or whatever picture you put in there. Again, these should enhance text. If you look at this, it also continues with page numbers. You can see that they've kept the titles as matched from their guidelines piece. So again, make sure you're keeping these exactly how they're shown in the order that they're shown. I'll show you one more example from another group. Obviously the executive summary, one thing they did was they took the company's logo and they put it into the footer of the paper and then put the page numbers up at the header. Okay? It's very important that you use color, you use those things. It just gives a great first impression and allows the judge to pick this up and say, wow, somebody put a lot of effort into this. The next thing we'll look at is what's called avoiding penalty points. So again, we're going to go back to the DECA website, and under the same project it'll say written entry checklist. I'm going to click on that and bring up this page. This gives you what's called our penalty points, or things to avoid doing. Now it's very important that you follow this to a T and make sure that your project does not have any of these things in it. For example, If you do any of these things, you lose points. So the best score that you can hope to get on this is actually a 0. You don't want to be walking into your presentation at your first competition at a disadvantage or at a negative number. So the very first thing is the written statement of assurances, which I'll take care of. You just have to come in and sign it on our due date. The next thing, it says that they must be submitted in the official folio. Again, that was that blue binder, which again I would take care of and make sure it gets into. Sheet protectors are never issued, don't worry about those. And you must make sure that you look at how many pages the max number was for your project. If you go over, it's 5 points per page, so you could get penalized heavily on that one. So make sure you follow that. If, for example, your project was an 11-page project, you can't exceed 11 pages. It has to be 11. And this does not include your table or your title page. Just some major content in the pages. All page numbers numbered in sequence starting with the executive summary and ending with the final page. Make sure that your title and your table of contents are in a separate document, and that way they don't mess up the page numbering, so that your pages will start with the executive summary number 1. Next, this is where people tend to lose points, is that major content is double spaced, not spaced in half. You must make sure that you follow that. As we read a little further, it says title page, table of contents, executive summary, bibliography, appendix, footnotes, long notes, materials and tables, figures, exhibits, lists, headings, and sample letters may be single spaced. So as long as we're following that, and I'll show you an example here what that looks like, we should be fine. Everything should be typed, which isn't an issue. It's going to be printed by me on nice paper, so again, don't worry about this. But again, coming back to those written guidelines, you must follow things, and they must be in the order that they were given. Okay, so let's go back and take a quick look at how a project might look and where penalties may occur. So if we look at this particular project, you'll notice that he has all of the different titles that are required, and that there's a double space in and a double space out of the titles and main content of the paper. Again, main content is anywhere you talk about things. However, he does have a graphic over here that he mentions a couple different things that enhance this text over here. This is considered a figure or a table. It can be single spaced. Now, as I scroll down, you would see that this little piece right here is not a double space from the title into this part. So if you do that, you're going to get penalized 5 penalty points. So again, double check your spacing. Make sure that you space a double space into a title and also out of a title. As we look at things, you'll also always want to make sure that if you have tables or charts, that your table does not break onto a second page and that it's simply on one page. Make sure that you do that, as it's a common mistake. Also, sometimes I'll see this is what I call an orphan, and an orphan is where you put a title in but the content doesn't start until the second page. Okay? Make sure you don't do this, as it makes it hard for the reader to understand what they're looking at. So again, make everything easy and you shouldn't have an issue. In finishing up, I want to talk to you about how you have to send your project to me so that I get exactly what I need in the exact format that it looks like on your screen. Okay? So the first thing that you'll do is, once you're finished with your Deca project, everything is perfect how you want it, it looks great on your screen, what I'm going to ask that you do is go to File and download as a PDF. PDFs are universal documents. They allow, no matter what computer they're on, to show up as they showed up on your computer. So you'll save this as a PDF and then save that to your desktop or some location on your computer. Next, you'll do that same thing with your table and title pages, and you'll just save that in a separate document. When you're finished and have them both saved as a PDF, what you'll do is you'll go to your email and you're going to open up a new email. You're going to attach both your main